took Lizzie 2 hours and 3 filters just to feel beautiful enough to hit send. It took the most dangerous man in Chicago 1 text in 60 minutes to shatter her door and her world forever. This is Lizzie's story, a story about a wrong number, a dangerous obsession, and the kind of raw, unexpected love that only happens when the universe decides to break all the rules. If you've ever made a mistake that changed your life, you know how scary this can be. Tell me, have you ever accidentally sent a private text to the wrong person? Let me know in the comments below, but first, let's watch how Lizzie's life explodes. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to Lizzie's skin, even 2 hours after her 12-hour shift at Chicago General. She was tired, bone-deep exhausted, her mind a dull throb of exhaustion and disappointment. Tonight marked 6 months since her fiancé had left her, citing her demanding schedule as a reason to seek a simpler life. Simpler. Lizzie had spent her adulthood building a life of purpose, only to find herself professionally necessary, but personally disposable. She collapsed onto the floral armchair in her tiny 2-room apartment on the city's north side. Her fingers brushed against the photo frame on the side table, a picture of her mother in Accra, radiating warmth. Lizzie missed that warmth. Here, in the relentless churn of the city, she felt cold and diminished. Across town, high above the frantic lights of the Loop, Jamin sat behind a desk of polished granite. The office was silent, save for the rhythmic tick of an expensive clock. Every detail of his life was controlled, sterile, and lethal. He was the architect of shadows, the one who moved the money, the men, and the fates of anyone who dared cross the Korean syndicate's line in the Midwest. Tonight, he was finalizing the details of a competitor's quiet ruin. His face was a mask of cold concentration, his dark suit impeccable. Control was his religion. Emotion was a weakness he hadn't indulged in since childhood. Lizzie stood in front of her mirror. She pulled out the red silk lingerie she'd bought 3 years ago for her engagement party. It was a desperate attempt at self-affirmation. She snapped the photo, hair braided and neat, the silk a shocking contrast to her deep brown skin. Still got it, she typed in the caption, targeting the number of her best friend, Kemi. But her thumb slipped, tapping the contact saved just above Kemi's, the number of a lawyer she'd consulted last month. She hit send before she even registered the name. A pit opened in her stomach. Simultaneously, the subtle, high-pitched ping of an incoming encrypted message cut through the silence of Jamin's penthouse office. He paused, his expression unchanged, and picked up the secure phone. The photo of the beautiful black woman in red silk filled the screen, confident and raw. Jamin, who dealt in threats and power, felt something unfamiliar. A sudden, powerful, and utterly magnetic obsession. He stared at the image for a full minute before his fingers moved across the glass, typing a response that would irrevocably seal both their fates. Lizzie's scream was a choked, soundless thing that died in her throat. She stared at the screen, her vision blurred by panic. It wasn't the lawyer's number, it was an unfamiliar, encrypted sequence, but the photo, her photo, was marked as red. No. 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 She mashed the unsend button repeatedly, knowing her cheap, old phone wouldn't allow it. Her phone buzzed, vibrating on the wooden side table like a startled insect. Unknown number, keep the silk. And the confidence. Lizzie's hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the phone. The sheer audacity of the reply, the assumption, the possession, made her blood run cold. She scrambled to apologize, trying to reassert the boundary of her professional, orderly life. Unknown number, wrong number. I am so sorry. Please delete that immediately. It was a mistake. The reply was instantaneous, slicing through her apology like a razor on unknown number. Mistakes are often destiny, Lizzie. Her breath hitched. Lizzie, how did he know her name? She hadn't included her name in the initial text, and the number wasn't from her contact list. Unknown number, who is this? How do you know my name? The final response was not a question, but a sentence of judgment, signed with chilling authority. Unknown number, J. Min. And I know your address. I'm knocking. Lizzie stood frozen for 2 heart-stopping seconds, convinced it was a twisted joke, a digital horror film unfolding on her phone. But then, an abrupt, heavy rhythm echoed through her tiny apartment. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't the tentative tap of a delivery person or a neighbor. It was a decisive, powerful cadence vibrating through the floorboards, demanding entry. She crept toward the peephole, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her eye met polished black leather shoes, custom-made and expensive, standing perfectly still on her welcome mat. She followed the line up, tailored black trousers, a charcoal trench coat, and then the man's face. Sharp, cold, devastatingly handsome, framed by dark, slicked-back hair. His eyes, dark as burnt coffee, were already locked on the peephole, as if he knew exactly where she was looking. This wasn't a creep or a construction worker. This was a king standing at her door. He raised a hand and repeated the heavy beat. Knock, knock. Open the door, Lizzie. His voice was deep, cultured, yet carried the silent weight of a threat, cutting cleanly through the thin wood. I don't like waiting. Lizzie snatched back from the door as if burned, clutching her mouth to stifle a hysterical sound. The man, Jamin, knew her name, her address, and had arrived within the hour of her mistake. Her training as a nurse kicked in, forcing a fragile shield of logic over the terror. Do not engage. Do not panic. Deny the connection. Go away! She called out, her voice shaky but firm. I don't know who you are, and if you don't leave my property immediately, I am calling the police. A low, humorless laugh filtered through the wood. The police? Jamin's voice dripped with lethal amusement. You think a photo sent to a private, encrypted line constitutes harassment? Or perhaps you'd prefer to explain to the authorities why you are sending indecent pictures to strangers? It would be a messy headline, Lizzie. Bad for your hospital, worse for your immigrant status. He paused, letting the implications settle. Lizzie's stomach twisted. He hadn't threatened her physically, yet he had already analyzed and attacked every vulnerable pressure point in her life. Her professional stability, her immigration status, her reputation. This wasn't a random stalker. This was someone with reach. I am not playing games, she managed, backing away into the living room, searching frantically for her keys and phone. This was a mistake. Delete the photo and leave me alone. I will never contact this number again. You already have, Jamin stated simply. That photo was a promise, a glimpse of vulnerability I didn't expect. I see you, Lizzie Thompson. The woman hiding behind the scrub uniform trying to recapture her fire. I don't discard things I want. The relentless pressure prevented her from thinking straight. She knew instinctively that hanging up the phone and blocking the number wouldn't work. Blocking the number wouldn't block the man standing outside her door. She was a professional caregiver, used to handling emergencies with calm authority. But this man, this dangerous puzzle, had stripped her of all control. He was an external force demanding an internal surrender. She had to break this contact. She fumbled with her phone, found the number, and blocked it, slamming the device onto the counter. Silence. Blessed, immediate silence. She leaned against the kitchen counter, sweat slicking her palms. He's gone. I won. I resisted. But the relief was instantly smothered by a fresh wave of dread. She knew with chilling certainty that men like Jamin don't respond to being blocked by simply walking away. They see it as a declaration of war. Lizzie didn't sleep. By 6 o'clock a.m., the fear had congealed into rigid determination. She dressed in her crispest scrubs, packed her lunch, and walked out of her apartment, convinced that by ignoring the event, she could erase it. The sidewalk was empty, normal. The street was humming with morning traffic, normal. She got to the hospital, clocked in, and buried herself in the relentless demands of the trauma bay. At 11 o'clock a.m., a nurse manager, Mrs. Davies, tapped her on the shoulder. Lizzie, someone is here for you. Outside the staff entrance, urgent personal matter. Lizzie's heart skipped a beat. She walked toward the entrance, steeling herself to face a sleek black sedan, or perhaps Jamin himself. Instead, she found a man in an immaculate black suit, silent and imposing, leaning against a custom Maybach. He was Korean, tall, and wore dark sunglasses. Miss Thompson? The man asked, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. My name is Tay. Mr. Jamin sends his regards. He has reserved a private room for you at the Meridian for dinner tonight at 7 o'clock p.m. I told him no, Lizzie stated, crossing her arms, trying to project a defiance she didn't feel. I will not be going anywhere with him. Tell him that, Tay. Tay's face remained neutral, but his eyes, visible behind the dark lenses, held a silent, unwavering authority. Mr. Jamin received your message. He considered it a preliminary negotiation. He asked me to convey that if you are not in this car by 6:30 p.m., the car will not move, but the driver will come inside. And he does not want me to come inside the hospital. The threat was subtle but devastating. He wasn't threatening her yet. He was threatening her job, her colleagues, and the highly sensitive environment of the hospital. He was forcing her to choose between her personal safety and the chaos he could effortlessly create at her workplace. Lizzie stared at the Maybach, the symbol of absolute, untouchable power. By 6:30 p.m., she was walking out of the staff entrance, her purse clutched tight. Tay opened the back door. The car smelled of rich leather and an expensive sandalwood cologne. And there he was. Jamin. He was wearing an even darker suit than before, his presence consuming the luxurious space. He didn't look up immediately. He was scrolling on his phone, his jaw set in cold perfection. You look beautiful, Lizzie, he said without looking up, his voice low. But you're late. I hate being kept waiting. Lizzie slid onto the leather seat, maintaining the maximum possible distance between them. I am not beautiful and I am not yours, she stated, her voice tight with suppressed anger and fear. I am here because you threatened my professional life. This is not a date, Jamin. This is coercion. Jamin finally lowered his phone and turned to face her. His eyes, the color of cold obsidian, held no judgment, only intense, focused attention. Coercion is what makes people move, Lizzie. Necessity is the only currency I trust. But the necessity here is mutual. You need to be seen, and I need distraction. He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a small, antique silver locket. It was delicate, tarnished with age and completely out of place against his severe suit. He opened it, revealing a faded photograph of a stern-looking woman wearing a traditional hanbok. My mother, he said, his voice lowering to a near whisper, devoid of its usual power. She died when I was 7. She was the last person who ever spoke to me without asking for money, fear, or power. After her, it was only control. Control is the only way to avoid feeling like a 7-year-old orphan again. He snapped the locket shut, the vulnerability gone as quickly as it had appeared. That is my world. Now you know why. I am the way I am. Lizzie stared at the locket, the simple, sudden confession chipping away at her rigid fear. She saw not the monster, but the origin of the monster. A broken child encased in impenetrable armor. You think that justifies this? She whispered, gesturing between them. I am a nurse. I help people. I heal wounds. You cause them. She took a deep, shaky breath, her turn to offer a truth. I came to this country alone, escaping the political instability back home, chasing a dream of stability. My fiancé left me because I gave too much of myself to my job, because I was too intense. I took that photo because I needed to remind myself that I was still desired, still worthy of the life I'm trying to build. You saw a piece of my broken heart, Jamin, not an invitation. Jamin studied her face, his gaze burning, absorbing every detail of her pain. A broken heart is honest, Lizzie, and honesty is the only thing I've ever truly respected. I promise you this, I will not break you further. I will only protect what you tried to hide in that photograph. The Meridian was a blur of hushed elegance, but they were in a secluded, soundproof private dining area. The lavishness only amplified the strange intimacy between them. As the waiter served delicate courses, they talked not about the photo or his business, but about their current lives. You run a trauma unit, Jamin noted, picking up on a detail Lizzie had mentioned about her job. You see the worst of humanity, yet you choose to save it, every single day. I see the broken pieces, Lizzie corrected softly. And I try to put them back together. It's a calling, it's what I have left. Jamin smiled then, a rare, genuine contraction of his facial muscles that momentarily erased the coldness. It was shockingly handsome. You have fire, Lizzie, the same defiance you showed me on the phone, you carry into your work. He had begun pursuing her not with threats, but with meticulous, thoughtful attention. He knew she hated the loud city sounds after a night shift, So he had Tay send a quiet humidifier and scented oils to her apartment, not as a gift, but as a necessary item for stress management. He didn't send roses, he sent a small, perfectly potted orchid, remembering she'd mentioned they reminded her of her grandmother's garden. One evening, Jaemin appeared at the hospital after she finished a particularly exhausting double shift. A rival faction had caused some trouble near Koreatown, threatening a local clinic she sometimes volunteered at. Jaemin didn't move against the faction violently. He used his influence to quietly flood the area with legitimate, high-profile security and insurance offers, effectively freezing the rivals out. "I didn't cause harm," he told her later, watching her face for a reaction. "I applied order." "Thank you," Lizzie whispered, the words catching in her throat. She realized he was using his darkness to protect her light, bending his dangerous world to suit her needs. This was not the possessive fantasy she had feared. This was real, protective devotion, terrifying and undeniably compelling. She was falling, not for the monster, but for the man who was terrified of losing the one honest thing he had found. You know, if you're enjoying this unpredictable, dangerous romance, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We promise the chaos is just getting started. The truce, built on orchids and quiet protection, lasted only 3 beautiful, terrifying weeks. The shattering came in the form of a headline on a sleazy tabloid website. Mafia boss's nurse, ruthless Jaemin exposed by his own mistress's sordid photo. Lizzie was finishing her shift when Kemi, her best friend, called, hysterical. "Lizzie, your photo, the one you sent. It's everywhere. Not the original, but a distorted screenshot attached to an article detailing Jaemin's alleged criminal activities. They're calling you the African siren who compromised his operation." Lizzie felt the antiseptic scent in her nostrils turn to ash. She ran home where Jaemin was already waiting, his penthouse apartment cold, violent, and radiating lethal fury. He was pacing, the sleek lines of his suit failing to contain the coiled tension. "How could this happen?" she demanded, throwing her work bag onto the marble floor. "I blocked the number. You said you applied order." Jaemin stopped, his dark eyes colder than Lizzie had ever seen them. "The network is compromised. This wasn't a rival. This was internal, calculated, and aimed to destabilize me using my one weakness." He gestured toward the screen, showing the vicious article. Your careless mistake." The harsh words sliced through the fragile trust they had built. Lizzie's fear turned into white-hot anger. "My mistake? My mistake was sending a photo to the wrong number. Your mistake was building a world of shadows so dark that anything pure that enters it gets immediately poisoned." "The photo was vulnerable, yes, but it was also reckless," he roared, his voice bouncing off the high ceilings. "I told you, control is the only thing that survives. You let your guard down. You brought this mess to my doorstep." "I brought a spark of humanity, and you crushed it," Lizzie shouted back, tears of frustration and devastation streaming down her face. "You didn't love the woman. You loved the challenge of the mistake. You are still the same cold bastard who knocked on my door." She turned, grabbing her coat. "I can't breathe in your controlled world, Jaemin. I can't heal in it. I thought you were different. I thought you saw me, but you only see yourself reflected in my fear." "Where are you going?" His voice was dangerous, possessive. "Back to being invisible. Back to being safe," Lizzie sobbed. "I was better off alone, at least then. My mistakes only hurt me." She walked out, leaving the silk-lined perfection of the penthouse for the chaotic anonymity of the street, convinced she had been a fool to believe a monster could ever be tamed by love. The choice? Lizzie was back in her small apartment, packing boxes. She had resigned from the hospital, citing personal stress. She was going home, back to Ghana, to lick her wounds and rebuild a life where the most dangerous thing she faced was a power outage, not a mafia boss. Every memory of Jaemin, the thoughtful orchid, the protective application of order, the vulnerability of the silver locket, warred with the shattering accusations he had hurled at her in their final moments. "Careless mistake. Only sees herself reflected in my fear." Meanwhile, Jaemin was alone in his fortress. Tay and his team had been dismissed, ordered to secure the perimeter but not to enter. He sat at his desk, the article still glowing on the large screen, no longer feeling anger, but a profound, aching emptiness. His control had failed him. His ruthlessness had driven away the one honest, uncontrolled thing in his life. He realized the core of their conflict wasn't the photo, it was his fear of vulnerability. He hadn't accused Lizzie, he had projected his own self-loathing onto her. He was terrified that if he surrendered his control, he would be the 7-year-old orphan again, powerless and alone. He pulled up the records from his apartment building's security system. Not for evidence, but for comfort. He watched the silent, grainy footage of Lizzie walking home from work, laughing with Kemi in the lobby, tending her orchid by the window. He had been watching her, protecting her, long before the wrong text. The photo hadn't been the start. It had just been the excuse to finally approach the light he'd been circling for months. He made a decision that dismantled the foundation of his entire life. He reached out to his consigliere, initiating the process of transferring his entire organization, legitimizing the assets, and dissolving his ties to the criminal life. He was shedding the armor he had worn since he was a child. He was choosing her. Then he left the penthouse. He left the security detail, the power, and the darkness behind. He drove his own car, a standard sedan, to her neighborhood. He needed to face her, not as the Mafia boss Jamin, but as the man who was terrified to lose her. He stood on her welcome mat, his hand raised. He didn't knock 3 times, demanding entry like he had before. He simply placed his palm flat against the door, leaning his forehead against the cool wood, waiting for her to make the choice. Resolution. Lizzie heard the faint sound of a car idling outside, but no knock. Only a weight against the wood. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the handle of her packed suitcase. She had been ready to walk away forever, but her heart refused to move. She slowly, deliberately opened the door. Jamin stood there. No suit, no bodyguard, no cold expression. He was wearing dark jeans and a simple wool coat, his hair slightly windswept, and his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and genuine pain. He looked utterly human. "I'm leaving, Jamin," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I can't do this." "I know," he said, his voice low, raw. He didn't cross the threshold. "I came here to apologize, not for my world, but for putting the blame on you. You were brave. I was a coward." He took a shaky breath. "I started the process this morning. I'm transferring the organization. I'm getting out. All of it. The power, the legacy, the control. I will build a new life. A legitimate life. Far from here. Not for you, but because of you. Because you showed me that control is useless if you have nothing real to protect." Lizzie's breath hitched. This was the ultimate surrender, the sacrifice of his identity. "Why?" she asked, the tears blurring her vision. "Because the moment I saw that photo, I saw the only thing I've ever respected. A woman who is trying to heal herself. And when I saw you walk out, I realized I'd rather be powerless with your honesty than ruling an empire without your light." He stepped back, a gesture of respect and space. "I'm not asking you to stay in Chicago. I'm asking you to trust the man who is giving up everything, just to be worthy of your beautiful, dangerous mistake." Lizzie looked into those dark, intense eyes and saw the vulnerable boy who had shown her his mother's locket. She dropped the handle of her suitcase. The noise echoed in the small room. "Where will you go?" she whispered. "Somewhere warm. Somewhere far from shadows. I have a property in Portugal. A vineyard." He almost smiled. "I hear it's quite legitimate." Lizzie walked toward him, placing her hand gently on his chest. Beneath the wool, his heart was pounding. "I love you, Jamin," she confessed. "And I hate that I love you. But I love the man who is standing here now." "Then let's go, Lizzie Thompson," he said, taking her hand and pulling her into a fierce, protective embrace. "Let's go build a life that's worth the fight." Epilogue, reunion 2 years later. The air in the Portuguese vineyard smelled of rich earth and sun-warmed grapes. Lizzie laughed, a genuine, easy sound as she adjusted the bouquet of white lilies. She was wearing a simple, elegant ivory dress. She felt a strong, familiar pair of arms wrap around her waist. "You're late, Mrs. Min," Jamin murmured, kissing her neck. "Just setting up for the reception, Mr. Min," Lizzie replied, leaning back against her husband. They had married 6 months ago in a small private ceremony. Jaemin was now a successful, internationally known exporter of fine wines, his intensity channeled into building a legitimate, respected empire. Lizzie managed their foundation, which funded education and nursing programs back in Ghana. "You know what I realized today?" Lizzie asked, turning to face him. "That photo, the one that started everything?" Jaemin smiled, running a hand through her hair. "My accidental, perfect mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," Lizzie corrected softly. "It was fate using a wrong number to force two people who were running from their own hearts to finally crash into each other." Jaemin looked at her, his eyes full of a love that was pure, honest, and utterly controlled by her presence. "And for that, I am eternally grateful." He leaned in and kissed her, right there amidst the scent of lilies and earth, a world away from the shadows of Chicago. He had lost an empire, but he had gained a soul. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is expose your heart, but sometimes, that vulnerability leads you to the safest place on earth. If you loved watching Lizzie and Jaemin's journey from chaos to commitment, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more crazy, raw romances. And we want to know, do you think Jaemin would have ever left his criminal life if Lizzie hadn't walked away? Tell us your thoughts in the comments.